Welcome to Operation Move podcast. My name is Zoe and I'm not really sure what we're talking about this week, but I'm just going to dive right in. So it has been a pretty crazy, I think it's about 3 weeks since I recorded the podcast, because that was about the time that I picked up a freelance writing contract, which took a bit of time, and it's just one of those things where someone's just, you can do it all, but just not necessarily all at the same time. So, and then things start to get really, I guess, the last couple of weeks in particular have been pretty full on with all of the virus stuff, and every race you can possibly imagine being postponed or cancelled, and all of the sort of self-isolation stuff as well. And which I'm currently doing. So I'm not going to the gym for a couple of weeks, just to be on the safe side, because we went down to Melbourne with Grand Prix tickets and it got cancelled, and which you can now, so you can see why. But then we were sort of in the awkward position of being in Melbourne and not really able to come home sooner without laying a whole heap of money. So we just stayed there and made the best of our trip. But sort of towards the end, we were starting to get pretty uncomfortable with being on, obviously being down there and without our car and everything, like just so much exposure on public transport, and I was just really happy to get home. And although we were careful with hygiene practices and everything else while we were down there, I realised that just the potential of having picked something up and not having symptoms was relatively high. And when you're then going like back into a more isolated community where we are, the chances of then passing something on is also relatively high. So I just decided to do self-isolation for 14 days as much as possible. So I'm going to the grocery store when I need to, and obviously picking up kids and whatever else, but for the most part just maintaining my distance, not going to the gym and not doing anything that's not pretty essential. And luckily for me, I can still run, and in theory I can still use the gym in my garage, which I have actually yet to do as yet. But it's just one of those things whenever I get back from being away, I spend so much of the time just catching up on everything that there are often things that tend to fall by the wayside. And I think it's just one of those things too, where like once you have like a break in any kind of routine, like with essentially being away for a week, it's just really easy to fall out of those sorts of habits. And I think it also can take like a little bit of a mental adjustment going from, like I'm training for this event to going, well, I'm probably not training for that event anymore, because even though like I had planned on probably doing something in April, which is definitely not on the cards now, and even though I've registered for the Gold Coast, I have a hard time believing that that's going to go ahead. And even though things are being currently postponed to September or October, like it's hard to even say if those things will go ahead. So it does just take like a little bit of a mental shift. And when all of that sort of stuff was happening, I was just thinking, I'm just going to take the break while we're away to just have a bit of recuperation period, bit of a reset. So I did some of my runs, but also had some rest days in there. And so this week I'm sort of getting back into the more sort of like full run program, and we'll probably, depending on how things go with the kids this afternoon, we'll probably go into the garage and start doing some weights as well. And I think it's just natural in periods where there's a lot of anxiety involved, whether that's in terms of health or whether that's in terms of financial pressures. I mean, pretty much anyone who is working casually, there's a real sort of like financial risk there, you know, like with businesses needing to close down temporarily or otherwise, or, you know, just have sort of reduced hours. You know, there's all of that sort of stuff going on, and anytime there's that sort of personal anxiety or sort of like more societal anxiety about, you know, sort of like downturns, it is going to bleed in to running and training and other things as well. And so sometimes that might look like, okay, you know, I'm going to be really committed to all of my routines because that's what is going to best support my mental health through this process. And sometimes that's also relaxing those routines and say, I'm just going to give myself a minute here before I regroup. And it's pretty safe to say I've been doing a little of column A and a little of column B. And, you know, just I think the important thing with that, which is also what I talked about on did like a Facebook Live today, is just giving yourself the space to do that. You know, like now it's never the time to sort of be down on yourself for any choices that you do make, but particularly when there are any situations where there's added pressure, is definitely not the time to feel guilty about something or feel like you are sort of like missing the mark in some way or whatever it is, because everyone's going to respond to things differently. And although I'm lucky in that there's sort of not like a direct threat at the moment to sort of either coaching or my other part-time work, because my work is more casual based. I'm not like, for my part-time stuff, I'm not a permanent employee. So there is that level of anxiety around, and also the other things that can impact it, like what is it going to look like if the school closes and the kids are at home? Like, I know how well or not well, as the case may be, I do with the 6-week school holidays. So those sorts of things come in, and it is all just like stress. So you've got to then carefully sort of manage whatever your physical stress is on top of that in terms of running. And although it's heaps better, I do have this slight sort of probably like a micro tear situation, sort of like high hamstring, and it's getting heaps better, but I can still feel that it's still got like a little bit of recovery to go. So sort of like erring on the side of doing a bit less and doing a bit less intensity is also a good thing. And there is no pressure for it to be 100% at a certain time. And in general, that's sort of how I approach things anyway, because there is always more races, you know, so there's no point in risking anything for like a particular date because there's always more. So yeah, so that's sort of just been my approach so far. And I think the main thing too is to be fostering those social connections which might not be happening in person at the moment. So with me being away from the gym for a couple of weeks and parkrun being cancelled, you know, it is the kind of thing where sometimes all of that stuff that feeds your social life is not just happening automatically. So you kind of have to go and seek it out a little bit more than you would otherwise. So you're not literally self-isolating, you're just physically isolating, but you're still getting what you need socially. So for this week, I thought because I've started sort of recording some of my workouts for YouTube, so you can check that out on there. But I thought I'd go through a bit about what I've been doing this week. And I did on, I guess it was on Sunday, I did a long run down in Melbourne, with someone I coach, and that was awesome. We did 20 kilometers, and it's such a cool thing about being in the city of doing something point to point. So we went from, I think we started out at Alamein, and we ran into the city, which was super fun. And you can do that when you can then just like catch a tram or a train back to where you were, which is not the only option when I'm home for that, is if I get Josh to pick me up and possibly bribe the children with smoothies or ice cream. So I don't do that very often, but it was a lot of fun. And being an online coach, it is always super cool to meet people in person and run with people, because I never run with people when I'm at home. Usually it's just one of those things where like 99.99% of everything I do is on my own. So it is a great treat when it happens in person. And I think you also get to find out what your actual easy pace is, because you think that you know what like a talking pace is, and then you actually run and talk and you realize what it is. So that's always like a good little check as well. So that went by, those, like few hours went by super fast on Sunday. And then on Monday, we were going home that afternoon, and so I was still kind of like, I don't know, like about getting up. Should I go or should I not go? And then I was like, just go. So I went. This is 100% what happens as soon as you're out of a routine. Like I do not think about should I go or should I not go when I'm at home. But anyway, I delayed getting out of bed for as long as possible, because I knew we had to check out at 10. So I went and did a 10k run. At that stage, I was able to sort of like navigate my way to the Yarra Trail without getting lost, which was awesome. Did that. It's just such an amazing place to run. Like there's just so many places to run. It's so cool. And got a text message from Josh on the way back saying, they've just declared a state of emergency. I think we should get to the airport. So packed everything up, went to the airport, and I said to I was like, like maybe we'll go to check in and they'll put us on an earlier flight. Sometimes that happens. But then we went there and I realized now everything's completely computerized, so you don't actually have to talk to anyone. But I saw an inquiry desk and I went up to them and I said, look, any chance that you could put us on an earlier flight, because we're here now? And she sort of looked at her computer and she said, that'll be $50 per passenger. And I said, okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll just wait then. And as I was about to leave, she called me back and said, actually, I can do that for you for free. So it's awesome. So instead of getting home at what would have been like around 9:30 at night, we got home at 4:30, and then we later found out that our flight had been had been delayed as well. So it would have been even later than that. So it was very grateful that we did actually get on that flight, because it's sort of like once you're in that thing of just wanting to get home, like you want it to happen like 2 hours ago. So not having to wait around at the airport for hours and hours was a hugely good thing. So yeah, and then went home, and it was good too, because like the kids weren't totally exhausted and they were not sort of staying up super late to wait for us. So it was a pretty normal night for them too. So the next day, on the Tuesday, I was actually originally on my plan, it was for me to run 30 kilometers, but with the travel and everything, I decided to push that run out to the next day, and I did an easy 12 down in Ballina, and it was pretty good. It was nice to be home. I was expecting it to kind of like feel really warm and uncomfortable compared to Melbourne, and just like so much more humid, but autumn is actually starting to show up, so it was pretty pleasant and nice to sort of do that to kick off like getting back into the swing of things. And then on Wednesday was the long run, and now normally, even though it's 30 kilometers, I would do that at I would start at like 4, and sort of like finish probably around 7 so I could get home in time to get the kids ready for school. And even though it's a super early start, I sort of prefer that because at least you're not doing it in the heat of the day. But that particular day they had school photos, and they had like a sibling photo appointment at 8:23, and I was like, that's just like cutting it a little bit fine for me to do that run, then get home, get them ready for school photos, get their lunches, take them to school for school photos, come back, you know, finish getting ready and then take them to school, even though the school's only like a 3-minute walk away, if that. Even so, I thought it's probably just a bit too much stress. So I'll sleep in, I'll do the photos thing, and then I will go down. And it was supposed to only be like a high of 24, 25. So I'm like, probably won't be that bad. And it was pretty good, really. So I went down, and my run was 2.5K warm up, and then 25 kilometers at sort of 95 to 100% of marathon pace, and then a 2.5K cool down for 30Ks all up. And sometimes those runs will be pace-based. This one was more heart rate-based. So it was just sort of basically sitting on what my marathon pace heart rate is, which is about 163. So I just kind of had the guideline on my watch of my heart rate being in between 155 and 165. And I would probably say like the first, probably, I'm guessing like first half of that felt really good. Like I felt pretty comfortable. My hamstring felt like it was doing pretty well, and what has been happening is that will feel a bit tight, and then the kind of like the glute and hip will kind of like seize up around it, and that's definitely calmed down a lot. So it was pretty pleasant. And then the second half, it started to heat up. I started running into a never-ending headwind, and it started to feel like not uncomfortable, but I definitely felt like I was working it, and just could see like the average pace of it slowly slower and slower. And in my mind, I'm just like, just let this happen, because this is happening to effort. This is going to happen when you're running into a headwind and it's getting warm. So just not getting overly attached to the pace. And that's also part of why I have it set up to not do auto laps. So it doesn't give me kilometer splits while I'm running. It's just one. You know, it's got it set up as the step is 25 kilometers at this. And so it does not beep at me at all during that, unless I'm going underneath where I should be in the heart rate or over. So that's the only, so I just basically started at 155, aimed to sort of, and probably by around halfway I was up to 163 or so, and I just aimed to keep it there from then on, which the benefit of heart rate runs is it's really easy to keep it there once you get going. And so probably the last 5 kilometers were a bit of a big ask, as I was starting to get pretty warm. And also probably reality is, with not having done a long run for a while at that stage, and having been pretty loose with what I was eating and drinking while I was in Melbourne, no surprises that started to feel a bit like work towards the end. But it was, overall it was good, and it wasn't that hideous in terms of the temperature. It was pretty good, really. It's starting to feel a whole lot more autumn-like now. And so then the next day I just was a 10K recovery run, and I did that at home, which is the benefit of like I can get up a little bit later, but it is also tends to be a few more hills, but nothing major, and just kept that pretty as easy as it could be anyway. And then today I had a 12K easy, which I also did at home, and just making the most of the extra sleep, really. So, you know, being sort of like averaging about 9 hours a night, which has been great. And that has been my week. And so tomorrow will be my first actual workout. Like I would consider like the long run was definitely a workout with staying at that pace for that long. But this one is going to be 1.6 kilometre repeats at sort of around half marathon-ish pace. But again, I'll probably do that to heart rate. Maybe not for the first few, because the first few heart rate probably won't get up there over, given that the interval's probably only about 7 minutes. But yeah, I'll just sort of see how everything goes with that, and that one I will get to do in the morning, so I'll probably feel significantly more comfortable than the long run. So that has been my week. Absolutely no strength training so far, but I will get back onto that, because that's the number one thing to improve the recovery with my micro tear, is to be doing strength training. So yeah, now that I'm sort of like getting back into the swing of my routine, that's sort of like the first thing that I want to focus on. But I also know that this weekend Riley has one sort of big presentation that she does every term, and my involvement of late has been escalating somewhat. So this project that she decided that she wanted to do was to make 5 different things that she would normally like buy from the shops, but see if we could make them at home but make them healthier. So the first thing we did was lamingtons, which I did without wheat flour and without processed sugar, and there was a fair amount of cannellini beans in it, which she liked. That went pretty well. We made potato chips in the oven instead of, like crisp potato chips, and we just made ice cream with like frozen bananas, frozen mangoes, and cocoa powder and a bit of Greek yogurt, which she also really liked. She's pretty easy to please. She's got Piper doing a whole sort of rating system on where she asks her to rate like how it looks, how it tastes, for both like the store-bought things and the things that we made at home. But Piper's so loyal to her, she rates everything as a 10 out of 10, which is really gorgeous, really. So this weekend we've still got to make granola bars and bread. So how much of my stuff I get done as well as doing that, we'll see. But I just handed in her expression of interest for year 7, so I'll enjoy her still hanging out with me for as long as humanly possible, especially now that parkrun has been cancelled, because she was gonna be coming with me to that, but obviously we can't do that at the moment. So I'll probably organise to do something just with the 2 of us, obviously not in a group setting, and probably just do something shorter than 5Ks, because I think that at the moment, like 1 to 2 kilometres would be a more enjoyable distance for her, and something that she could pretty comfortably walk run, as opposed to sort of walk running, like the 2 kilometres and then walking 3 kilometres at the end. I think that she'll probably get a bit more satisfaction out of the shorter distance and less time until she gets her hot chocolate at the end. So yeah, that'll probably be my plan with that. So I know that sort of with everything a bit up in the air in running land, and for a lot of people just, personally and with families and everything else, I know that there's probably, like there's more of a need for stuff that you can do at home and stuff that doesn't involve the gym or doesn't involve sort of potential like group training situations as well. So I'm aware of that and just sort of trying to work on things that I can do with Run Club and Patreon sponsors for people who are signed up for that, and also just the broader community through the the Facebook group and page and stuff like that. So I'd welcome anyone's feedback on what you're looking for. Currently, we do a accountability check-in in the community group once a week, which you might like to take advantage of. I'm also looking at having some downloadable plans and stuff like that would just be for free, to sort of keep you going if you've had to sort of cut back on some of your gym time. And I will keep working on ways to do that. In terms of other things, the next round of Learn to Run starts on the 4th of May, and any early registration will hook you up with some training to do in the lead up to make that a really nice, smooth transition. Basically, it takes you through sort of like walking at different intensities and on different terrain, and it has like an introduction to strength training. So I try to only introduce a few movements each week so you can get comfortable with it, and it's that way it's not too many videos for you to look at in terms of what you're supposed to be doing. And then that sort of leads into some short run intervals towards the end of that, and then you can sort of jump into the Learn to Run program. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. And as always, you can always jump into Run Club if you're feeling like you want to take advantage of a broader range of plans and a really engaged, supportive group of about 100 people with access to coaches that you can ask questions of at any time, and also just get help from all of the other members and everything like that. And generally speaking, I would say that on average, like most people who have been in Run Club have been there in between 1 to 2 years. So it's not the kind of group where you get loads and loads of movement and you can't get to know people really well, because you can, because people who are members have usually been members for a long time, which is part of what makes it so fantastic. Other things that I'll be sort of looking at too will be looking at some possibility of maybe some virtual runs, things like that, just because I know like it really does help having something that you're working towards. Like it can be intimidating to have all of this open-ended space with no kind of like markers, particularly if you're newer to running. I think that for myself, because I've been running for probably about 6 years or so, or maybe it's more now. It's probably more, but I find that quite easy. But that's also because I really like training, and sort of like racing is sort of like more like, it takes me a bit more convincing to get me over the line with that, whereas I really like training. So that is probably a bit different for me in that way. But I know, for example, somebody sent me a thing today about how people who'd registered for the Brisbane run, they were being offered, like they could get a refund or they could do it as a virtual thing, which I think would be quite a cool thing to do. And also for the few people who are, well, not necessarily local to me, but within, like Brisbane's only 2 hours from me, I could go up and actually do that virtual run with a few other people as well. So those are the kind of things that we'll be working on, and I will be back next week, hopefully with something resembling consistency from now on.